The Book of Revelation, Chapter 7. The end of the world is being described. An angel rises from the east, holding the seal of God. And then, one by one, the 12 tribes of Israel are called by name. Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Joseph, Benjamin, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Manasseh. 12 names, 12 tribes, 12,000 sealed from each. But if you've been counting, you already noticed. One tribe is missing. Dan. Not forgotten by accident, not lost in translation. Missing, deliberately, completely. As if God himself reached into the final prophecy of all of human history and erased one of his own chosen people. The question is, why? And the answer might be the most unsettling thing you've ever heard about the Bible. To understand what Dan became, you first need to understand how he was born. Jacob had 12 sons, but they didn't all come from the same mother. Jacob loved Rachel above all others, but Rachel couldn't conceive, and in ancient Israel, that wasn't just heartbreak, it was shame, a public wound that never healed. So Rachel did something desperate. She gave her personal servant, Bilhah, to Jacob as a secondary wife. The child would legally be Rachel's. The child would carry Rachel's pain. When the boy was born, Rachel named him Dan. In Hebrew, God has judged me. God has heard my voice. Dan. The word means judge. It is a name born from suffering, from a woman so desperate for dignity that she found a loophole in her own grief. That origin matters, or at least that's what some ancient writers believed, because when they looked back at Dan's story, they saw the same pattern repeating: the ambition, the cunning, the willingness to step outside the rules, as if it had been written into the tribe from the very beginning. And then Jacob, old and dying, gathered all 12 sons to give them his final blessing. What he said about Dan was unlike anything he said to the others. Genesis 49:16-17. Listen carefully. Dan will provide justice for his people as one of the tribes of Israel. Dan will be a serpent by the roadside, a viper along the path that bites the horse's heels so that its rider tumbles backward. A serpent, hiding by the road, striking from below, invisible until the damage is done. Was Jacob blessing his son or warning the world about him? When the Israelites entered the Promised Land, every tribe received their portion of earth. Dan was given fertile coastal land, access to trade routes, the Mediterranean at their doorstep. On paper, it was a gift, but the Philistines were already there. Not some wandering band of nomads, a militarized civilization. Iron weapons, fortified cities, war machines. The Philistines didn't negotiate. They pushed. And Dan, unlike the other tribes, couldn't hold their ground. They were driven into the hills, squeezed out of their inheritance. The tribe named after judgment couldn't defend their own land. So they did something no other tribe did. They left. They sent 5 spies north, deep into territory far from the rest of Israel. Those spies found a city called Laish, peaceful, isolated, unwalled, completely unprepared. The people of Laish had no alliance with anyone, no army, no warning system. Dan sent 600 soldiers and annihilated them. They burned the city to the ground, rebuilt it from ash, and renamed it Dan. There's something important to understand about this moment. This wasn't conquest in the name of God. This was survival instinct masquerading as destiny. The tribe of Dan had been shaped by failure, and now they were willing to do whatever it took to carve out a place in the world. And then came the decision that changed everything. In their new northern home, Dan didn't build an altar to God. They built a shrine to an idol. Not by accident, not quietly, openly. They installed their own priests, men who weren't from the tribe of Levi, the only tribe the law permitted to serve as priests. They set up a carved image. They created their own system of worship, their own rules, their own version of faith. In the biblical world, this wasn't just a religious infraction, it was a declaration. We will do this our way. While the rest of Israel worshipped in designated places, under designated laws, Dan worshipped in the shadows of Mount Hermon, far from accountability, far from scrutiny. The tribe of the serpent had chosen to live like one, unseen, off the beaten path, following its own nature, and the rest of Israel noticed. Dan began to disappear from the official record, slowly at first, then completely. Which brings us back to that missing name in Revelation. For centuries after the writing of Revelation, scholars, bishops, and theologians stared at that missing name and felt something they couldn't quite explain. Dread. Irenaeus of Lyon, one of the most influential Christian thinkers of the 2nd century, was the first to say it plainly. He wrote that the Antichrist, the great deceiver of the end times, would rise from the tribe of Dan. His reasoning was precise. Jacob called Dan a serpent. In Scripture, the serpent is never a neutral image. From the Garden of Eden to the wilderness of Sinai, the serpent represents deception, rebellion, the power that works against God from the inside. And then came Hippolytus of Rome, one of the earliest writers to systematically document end times theology. He went further. He said Dan's absence from Revelation wasn't just symbolic. It was a verdict. Think about what that means. These weren't conspiracy theorists. These were the architects of Christian doctrine. Men whose writings shaped how billions of people understood the Bible for 2,000 years. And they looked at Dan and saw something that scared them. A tribe that was chosen and then chose otherwise. A tribe given the name Judge, who refused to be judged. A tribe sealed with the image of the serpent, who never tried to shed it. But here's what neither Irenaeus nor Hippolytus could fully explain. If Dan was erased from prophecy, where did they go? Around 722 BC, the Assyrian Empire swept through the northern kingdom of Israel and shattered it. Entire populations were deported, dispersed, lost to history. These became the 10 lost tribes. Most tribes vanished without a trace. But Dan was different. There is a single, strange line buried in the book of Judges, chapter 5. In a long poem listing what each tribe did during a time of crisis, it asks, "And why did Dan remain in ships?" Ships. While other tribes farmed and fought on land, Dan had gone to sea. They were sailors, traders, navigators, mobile in ways that the other tribes were not. When the Assyrians came, Dan had an exit strategy. And then the trail of names begins. The Danube River has carried its name since antiquity. Roman texts call it Danuvius. Denmark means literally the mark of Dan, the territory of Dan. And in the oldest mythological texts of Gaelic Ireland, a people called the Tuatha De Danann arrive by sea, carrying advanced knowledge, master craftsmen, lawmakers, navigators, associated with serpent imagery and the power of judgment. 3 names, 3 corners of Europe, all pointing in the same direction. Were these coincidences? Maybe. But ancient peoples didn't name rivers and nations after nothing. Names were survival. Names were identity. You named something Dan because something about it reminded you of Dan. And wherever these traces appeared, a pattern followed. New metalworking, new legal systems, new architecture. As if someone with knowledge had arrived among people who didn't have it yet. Here is the question that won't go away. What if Dan wasn't lost by history, but removed from it? The early church declared Dan dangerous. Irenaeus tied them to the Antichrist. Hippolytus called them spiritually corrupted. In theological circles, Dan became a name associated with treachery and divine abandonment. But names don't just disappear. Symbols outlive the stories attached to them. The serpent still appears on noble crests. The scales of justice still hang above courtrooms. The imagery survived, even when the name behind it was buried. History has always been edited by the people with power, and a tribe embedded inside the bloodlines and legal traditions of Europe would be a very inconvenient thing for both church and crown to acknowledge. So perhaps the more honest question isn't where Dan went. Perhaps it's, who decided we shouldn't know? Not everyone believes Dan went north. There are communities alive today, real people living in real places who say they are the descendants of Dan. And the evidence they carry is harder to dismiss than you might expect. The Beta Israel of Ethiopia, known to the world as Ethiopian Jews, have practiced Hebrew law for thousands of years. They observe the Sabbath. They follow the dietary restrictions of the Torah. They celebrate feasts that match the Old Testament calendar precisely. And their oral tradition, passed down across generations, says clearly, we came from Dan. In Nigeria, the Igbo people share striking parallels with ancient Israelite custom. Circumcision on the 8th day, avoidance of pork, sacred naming traditions, and among certain Igbo families, a direct claim of Danite ancestry. Further south, the Lemba tribe of Zimbabwe and South Africa practice what looks unmistakably like ancient Hebrew religion. Dietary laws, Sabbath observance, a priestly clan called the Buba. And when geneticists tested the Lemba's DNA, they found something extraordinary. The Cohen modal haplotype, a genetic marker found almost exclusively in Jewish priestly families from the ancient Near East. Science cannot confirm which specific tribe these communities descended from. Too many centuries have passed, too much movement, too much mixing, too much silence. But science did confirm that their ancestry traces to the ancient Levant. The serpent trail wasn't going in one direction. It was going everywhere. So let's return to Revelation 7. Every tribe is named. Every tribe is sealed. 12,000 from each, marked for protection in the final days of the world. And Dan is not there. Was it punishment for the idol at Laish? A warning about the Antichrist that the earliest theologians feared would come from their bloodline? Or was it something else entirely? A tribe so scattered, so embedded, so transformed by centuries of silent survival that even a divine census couldn't locate them. The tribe named after judgment, hidden like a serpent beside the road, still waiting, or maybe already here.
If you know something about Dan that we didn't cover, a name, a place, a symbol, leave it in the comments. Some trails can only be found when enough people walk them together. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper into the question history forgot to answer.